The room. The judge is still speaking, so essentially, she says the judge is ordering a pre-sentence investigation. Larry can probably tell you a little bit more about that, Larry the lawyer, but what I can tell you is they want to know for sentencing just everything about Jussie Smollett that will help inform the judge make a decision as to what sort of sentence he'll receive. Let me toss it back to you right now. I'm going to try to get some more information in the interim.
Dane, would you anticipate that Jussie Smollett or a representative from his family, his camp, will have something to say as they walk out?
Yeah, I do. I don't know if it'll be Smollett himself, but one of his brothers spoke earlier last week near the beginning of the trial. The family is very close. His mother is here, and most of his siblings are here. He's one of 7 children. Well, I would anticipate somebody from the family will have something to say. He does have PR people in his employ who've been working with the media on this trial. If he doesn't speak to us here, then perhaps he'll speak to some more cameras that are standing on the courthouse steps outside the building right now. We certainly know we're going to hear from Dan Webb. Likely we'll hear from the defense attorneys. Nene Uche was just mentioning before. Whether Mr. Smollett speaks or not, we'll find out shortly.
All right, Dane Placco live at the Layton Criminal Courthouse. Thank you, Dane. Let's check back in with Larry Yellen. So, Larry, we were talking about all of the charges. There are 6. He was found not guilty of count 6. I looked that up, and it is him telling a detective, Robert Graves, that he had been a victim of aggravated battery. So that one he's not guilty on. The other counts 1 through 5, were his telling various officers that he had been a victim of this crime.
And that may suggest that the jury didn't believe Detective Graves in the manner that he reported the story, or if Graves had testified, Graves' demeanor on the stand maybe wasn't believable. But in any case, the key factor here is that 5 out of 6 he was found guilty. And as Dane's pointed out, there will be a pre-sentence investigation that'll be done, I believe, by the probation department. They will look at everything in his past, what merits a longer sentence versus a shorter sentence. Those are not made public. They are discussed in court at the time of sentencing, but it's not something that will typically be released to the public or to the news media. And I was curious whether or not they set a sentencing date or if they're going to wait and see how long that investigation takes. One thing we haven't discussed yet, Dane pointed out that the defense lawyers will be coming down. I would not be surprised at all if they announced their intent to appeal this jury finding, and they were upset during the trial at the judge's demeanor. You may recall a couple of days ago, one of the defense lawyers broke down in tears and claimed that Judge Lynn had lunged at her during a sidebar outside the presence of the jury, and she had never seen a judge do that. She also claimed that the judge had been smirking or not taking some of the cross-examination questions by defense lawyers seriously, and indicating that with his facial expressions. All of this will go into a defense appeal of this case. It'll go to an appellate court in Illinois, and it may be more than a year before we eventually find out if the jury's verdict is upheld or overturned by an appellate court.
So in your estimation, it's maybe a long time before we really get this thing finished?
Well, he'll be sentenced, and it's possible if he just gets probation, the appeal won't be that significant. But right. In order to clear his name, say for example he's put on probation, which a lot of us expect, while he's serving that probation, his appeal will still go forward, and he could be seeking to clear his name with that appeal. Sure. On the other hand, he may just decide to let the whole thing drop. But the sense I get from his defense team, from their statements, is that they don't believe he got a fair trial from this judge, and they will be seeking to overturn it regardless of what the sentence is.
All right, Larry, you were cut off a little bit earlier, but you were trying to explain, in addition to this sentence of possible probation, how he has to pay anyone back. Is there restitution in the case?
Well, the city is trying to recover the dollars that were spent with all the police who investigated the case, the overtime that went into it, the amount of money that the city invested. I forget what the exact dollar figure was, but the city wants to get that money back, and they will they're pursuing that right now, I believe, in a case, a federal case, which is on hold at the Dirksen Federal Building until they saw how this trial came out. Now that he's been convicted, I think that will impact the city's decision to go forward, and they will probably try and recover those dollars. Mayor Rahm Emanuel at the time and then Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson were just furious that they had been duped into pouring thousands of dollars worth of resources into this investigation, which they later determined to be a hoax.
We should also mention, as you talk about that, we did reach out to Chicago police for some sort of a reaction or response. They have yet to respond to our inquiry. Right now, we want to head back to the Layton Criminal Courts building and talk to Dane Placco once again. Dane, what are you seeing?
Yeah, and we're continuing to get text messages from Casey Cronus up in the courtroom on the 7th floor. She says that they're still in the courtroom. The lawyers and the judge are still in the courtroom, tightening up loose ends, tying up loose ends, I should say, setting hearings going forward. This is important. Now, the judge ruled that Smollett will be kept on a recognizance bond, which is what he was on before. So they're not going to ask him to put any more money onto a bond now that he's been found guilty, and they're certainly apparently not going to take him into custody at this point. The lawyers are consulting over a date to set on Zoom to discuss post-trial motions. It apparently will be next month. They're going to Zoom, I'm reading now, on January 27th for post-trial motions. So, Smollett and his family still in the courtroom. Court proceedings winding down right now, and we should be seeing them come down in the next few minutes, I would guess. Adding to Larry's point, I can tell you, based on some of the trial testimony, this was the city of Chicago is going to make the argument that this was expensive for them to cover, to put all this manpower into a hoax. The lead detective in the case testified last week that the department had put 3,000 man-hours into its investigation, looking of the initial report of a racial and homophobic attack against Jussie Smollett. And if you do the simple math of police officers making anywhere from $50 to $70 an hour, that's close to $200,000 in taxpayer dollars. So it will be interesting to see whether the city tries to recoup that. Of course, Mr. Smollett has a legal team of 6 well-known established lawyers, so one would imagine, given the amount of time they've poured into this case, he's probably spent at least that and probably considerably more in mounting a defense. So, again, we're in the lobby of the Layton Criminal Courthouse. Still some activity going on in the courtroom upstairs. Now, I just got the note from Casey. Court is adjourned, and she is going to be heading down here now, as presumably will be some of the players in this case. Will be interesting to talk to Casey and get a little bit more play-by-play from her as to exactly how Smollett reacted in the courtroom and how other people reacted in the courtroom. Again, as I was saying before, because of COVID, they kept the courtroom to only 57 people, so there were very few spectators allowed in each day. There was a lot of media. There were a number of family members of Mr. Smollett, and some of his supporters were allowed in the courtroom, but it was not a full packed courtroom given the pandemic circumstances. You see what else she is telling me right now. That Casey is on the way down. We hope to see you here shortly. In fact, I'm starting to see some people coming around the corner. It's sort of have you guys been here before? I'm sure you've covered stories here in the past. You know that it's really 2 buildings. There's the older part of the courthouse that was built in the late 20s, early 30s over here, where the trials are actually held. It's a 7-floor building, a lot of old, large courtrooms. And then there's the administrative part of the operation over on the other side with this sort of interior wing connecting the two right in front of the front steps of the courthouse. That is where Kim Fox's offices are, over on the other side of the building, the Cook County State's Attorney. And this is certainly has to be seen as something of a rebuke of her actions in dropping this case back a couple years ago. She felt that it wasn't worth their time going forward pursuing a prosecution. That, of course, as you recall, set off an uproar. And here comes Casey now. Set off an uproar which led to the special prosecutor, Dan Webb, being appointed, and he has now managed to secure 5 guilty counts against Mr. Smollett. I'm going to let Casey come over here, and she can talk to us a little bit more about what was going on in the courtroom. Again, we should be seeing Jussie Smollett coming down here shortly. Also, his surrounded by his family. Will be interesting to see if he makes a statement. They do have people, media trained people working with them that will be able to assist in setting up any kind of a statement made here. Now, Why don't you guys take it for just a second? We're going to get in a position here.
We'll do that,
We'll be back to you in a minute, okay?
All right, Dane,
Thanks.
thank you. Let's turn it over to Larry Yellen while he gets all set up.
Yeah, Larry, if you're still with us, what do you make of the point that Dane touched on there about the 3,000 plus hours of investigation the Chicago Police Department put into this thing, and their their response to this and how they may pursue that? We
don't hear you, Larry. Let's see.
Oh.
Up there. We hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. It's an unusual case for a municipality to try and recover the dollars that are spent investigating a case. So you don't see it very often. But in this case, the police superintendent and the mayor were so upset, and so many dollars were expended investigating this, what now appears to have been a hoax, according to the jury. And the other interesting element is that the case received nationwide attention, and the city felt it had been embarrassed by Jussie Smollett's allegations. And as a result, I think they're going to push forward, and they will try and recover the costs of the investigation. As Dane pointed out, we haven't had a great deal of discussion about the politics here, but this case was originally, the charges were originally quietly dismissed against Jussie Smollett a couple years ago, very quickly. And at the time, the state's attorney said it was handled like any other case. He was given credit for his time for a few hours of community service, and was released without any guilty plea at all. And that's what upset a lot of people. Kim Foxx took a lot of criticism. People believed it might affect her chances for re-election, but Kim Foxx did win the re-election for state's attorney in Cook County. But in the meantime, this whole process was taking place in the background, where there were complaints from the public that he had not been sufficiently prosecuted. There was a lot of anger that there was no guilty plea in the original dismissal of the case. And eventually it was decided that a special prosecutor should be appointed. And that's how Dan Webb ended up in the case. Dane was pointing out that the prosecutors are on one side of the building and the courthouse is on the other side of the building, the older side. What's interesting is that Dan Webb really doesn't have any place in that building. He's a special prosecutor, just like the prosecutor who was brought in from Kane County to try the case involving Laquan McDonald. And so here you've got two high-profile cases where the Cook County State's attorney was not involved. Instead, it was special prosecutors who were brought in, and in both cases obtained convictions.
All right, Larry, stand by. We're going to ask you a few more questions, but we want to check in with Dane Placco because he's now joined by Casey Cronus, who has been in the courtroom, so she can give us an update on what Jussie Smollett's reaction was there at the Layton Criminal Court building. Hi, Casey. Tell us what you saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, as we were in the courtroom, Jussie Smollett really did not have a reaction. He was quite stoic the entire time the verdict was being read. The judge did ask everyone in the courtroom to just kind of control their emotions, as is typical in a trial like this. So really not a peep from the courtroom, not a peep from family members. Jussie really having a very still look to his face the entire time that verdict was read. Really no reaction.
Any reaction from his defense attorneys? Because I noticed yesterday during closing arguments, they were facially expressing themselves quite a bit when they heard something they didn't like from the other side.
Yeah, that's true. They've been a bit expressive. One of the defense attorneys, she did look upset with the verdict, understandably. They did ask the judge to speak off the record for a private conversation once court was adjourned, so the attorneys did go back into chambers. They're still upstairs right now. As far as we know, Jussie himself and relatives are also still upstairs.
Were they still in the courtroom, or were they out in the hallway outside?
In the courtroom. They had not left the courtroom just yet. Special prosecutor and his team were also in the courtroom. So was the defense. One of the defense attorneys going up to the bench once that verdict was read and the jury was released, asking to speak about an issue. She said there was an issue they wanted to address off the record. The judge said that court was adjourned, and that's when the attorneys and the judge went back into chambers.
And to describe the scene in the courtroom, it's a fairly large courtroom, as we were saying before. Several rows of old wooden benches, mostly filled with media. But the front row on the right side was all Jussie Smollett's family and a couple of his supporters. You say that when the verdict was read, you didn't see them react in any way.
A lot of them were looking straight ahead, trying not to really give off much of a reaction, it seemed. Again, the judge did say, you know, to control their emotions, if they needed to step out of the courtroom, but really very quiet. I mean, not a peep from the family or from Jussie himself. The only thing we did hear Jussie say was when the judge asked if he understood, he said, I do understand.
Any reaction from any of those parties on the not guilty verdict?
You know, no. I mean, really no reaction at all from anyone who was there in the courtroom. It was quite stoic and silent. So we hope to hear from his team as they head down and perhaps get a better idea of what's going through their minds.
Okay, again, we're waiting for everybody to come down from the courtroom, hoping to hear from Mr. Smollett himself. We think we're going to hear from a family member. We don't know if Smollett is going to speak. We'll certainly hear from the attorneys on both sides. Back to you.
All right, Dane, I wanted to ask Casey a question. Thank you for that. Casey, usually in cases like this, they do poll the jury. The defense often asks for that. I've seen that in a lot of cases. Did they poll the jury and ask them one by one if they agreed with the verdict?
They did. Once the verdict was read, the defense team asked for the jury to be polled. At that time, they did ask each jury member what if that indeed was their verdict. That he thought this trial was very fair. He made sure to say that. He thought it was very fair and that they were very fair and impartial. He commended them for taking notes, for showing up on time every day, and of course a lot of long days with the jury staying till 7 or 8 o'clock for several days last week. So
yeah, they were getting here about 8:30 in the morning, starting about 9:15 and going till 8 o'clock and even later on a couple of occasions. So the judge pushed them very hard on this particular case. He wanted to get it done in less than a week. It turns out it took about a week and a half to get it done.
Yeah.
Back to you.
Dane Placco and Casey Cronus, thank you for your coverage. Stay tuned. We'll be back to you in just a few minutes. Again, the main headline here, Jussie Smollett found guilty on 5 of 6 counts. Let's take a break right now from this, and shall we talk some weather?
Yes, let's check in with Chief Meteorologist Emily Walls. Emily, it's warming up each day, it seems.
Yeah, each and every day we've been adding a couple of degrees to our highs. Today, most of us made it into the mid to upper 40s, and then tomorrow, I think here in the city, we're talking highs right around 50 degrees.